So after doing a normal review of 28 Years Later, it feels only fitting to do a full-fledged spoiler review because the comments on that video, absolute war zone of disagreement. I love the passionate debate, but this feels like the rare time for me to go through scene for scene, spoil this film, elaborate on what I was thinking during these scenes, why I didn't think the movie worked, and why I think it's objectively a pretty bad movie. Spoilers chocked full coming ahead. Let's talk about the movie. So first scene of the movie, you have these kids sitting around watching the Teletubbies. Feels like a throwaway detail, believe me, it is not. But anyways, this is the opening scene of this franchise where the infected attack, except something felt off about this one. This was easily the worst of the three, and it just felt like there was no intensity to it. There was no stakes to it. The zombies felt goofy. They didn't feel threatening. They just looked weird. And I was instantly taken out, kind of chuckling to myself because it was so ineffective compared to the other movie's openings. But what we take away from this scene is a kid gets away and this crazy preacher who's preaching about Judgment Day gets killed in this church. And then we move on to the actual movie. So about 5 minutes later, we find ourselves on this island with Kraven the Hunter and his son Spike. This civilization or society, whatever you want to call it, has gotten by for almost 30 years because they are isolated. There is only one way in and out by this land bridge that gets submerged based on the tide. Not gonna lie, I actually thought this was a pretty cool little detail to write in conveniently why this society would have gotten by 30 years. This movie is so inconsistent logically, it demands full attention from you. You need to pay attention to all these metaphorical details, but the problem is it opens a can of worms with this society of why you would even leave this island. If you have managed to survive for almost 30 years, why would you ever go to the mainland? You have cultivated the land, you are farming, you can stay in isolation, you are completely safe. This is an unrelenting and ruthless world. But the reason they write into this movie to go onto the mainland is so that Kraven the Hunter can take his 14-year-old on a rite of passage where they can kill his first infected. I guess we've moved on past the talk we have with our dads when we become teenagers. We need to go out and risk our lives like idiots to kill some infected. So that's where we're at. When we go to the mainland with Kraven and his son, we find out a couple of major details of this film. The first being there are now multiple infected. There are alphas, there are these like fat slobs that eat bugs, and then there are the traditional ones. In the other movies, the infected were rabid, they were skin and bones, they were just out for blood. It felt like they were almost primal, they needed to eat permanently. In this movie, they don't even look like withered infected. They've been eating good for 30 years. Think of the caddy from Happy Gilmore, who only has one shoe and it's not level. They all look like that guy, hairy indigenous people who have not shaved in months. Which, continuing on with the infected, segues me to my second point. There is now a master zombie, or infected, whatever you want to call it, called an alpha. My understanding, they can like command the other infected. They are these giant brute Conan the Barbarian type. And the most important detail you need to know about the alphas is they are packing. The movie lets you know there's plenty of times you will get full frontal nudity of these alphas hogs. So you're going to spend a lot of time with Samson's free OnlyFans promo material before we find our way back to Kraven and his son, where they are out on their first hunt. And on this hunt, we first get introduced to our two major editing blunders. For some reason, this movie chose to splice as B-roll medieval footage that is dubbed over the actual movie dead center into the middle of the movie. Apparently somehow this relates to Brexit and industrial workers revolting. I don't give a shit. This is one of the most bizarre, stupid editing choices to splice this black and white medieval footage into the real film, but it's persistent throughout. The second thing being when they are on the hunt with these zombies, they're making use of dozens of editing tricks that just feels like bullet time, wonky, sporadic, choppy editing where it feels like every scene they did was filmed from 5 different angles and relayed over and over again to feel creative, but it just feels like something that's very childish. You'll have a character, they'll shoot an infected in the head, and then it'll morph 3 or 4 different camera angles to repeat the same shot. This was something that was very prevalent in the early 2000s and the 90s. I don't understand why this movie chose to do it. The point it got old after the 5th or 6th time and they never stopped doing it. And I said in my review, this is actually the best part of this film. I didn't mind the parts with the dad and the son because as bad as it was comparatively to the rest of the movie, this movie is like Oppenheimer. It was at least enjoyable. There's some good action scenes where they get chased by the infected into this house by the alpha, and there's a getaway scene on the land bridge. There's a couple of positives to this film, even though there's not a whole lot going on story-wise. But this goes on for 20 or 30 more minutes until about the 50-minute mark in the movie, I believe. And then a major turn happens where Spike finds out something bad about his dad. He's been having an affair. He thinks he's not looking after his mom's health because something is wrong with his mom. She's just loony. Something is not all there. And because of this, Spike decides the only reasonable choice he has in this world is to go back to the mainland himself. That's right. We have a 14-year-old going on 40. He is now mentally mature enough. He is trained enough. He can survive the most ruthless world ever depicted on screen in just 25 minutes of archery training. Actually forgot to mention, when he's with his dad still, his dad tells him this like folk story about this doctor who went crazy. That's Ralph Fiennes' character. We don't know anything about him, but because of this, Spike puts 2 and 2 together that he can get his mom to this doctor and get her the help she needs. The dad says that's not a thing, but for some reason, Spike doesn't trust his dad. But anyway, Spike decides it's time to go back to the mainland because he's had enough safety with his dad. He needs to go alone into this threatening world. He needs to take his mom to see this doctor. And this is the exact point in this film where it falls off an absolute cliff. At about the 50-minute mark, this movie just changes into this weird coming-of-age Last of Us clone. It's not interesting. It's not shot creatively. It is boring as dirt. And you're going to run into all of the plot inconveniences here. You're going to stumble upon a pregnant infected that the mom feels the need to deliver. She must not be up to date with her social justice because her body, her choice. Why are you helping her? But the mom decides to help this infected woman deliver her child before the soldier who is with them blasts this woman to smithereens. And it was at this very moment with this pregnant infected that I started to think this movie is probably irredeemable. I don't know how this movie can come back from this because this is so stupid and out of place. This is where we're starting to take the first big swings that just feel like they have no place in this universe. But yeah, I forgot to introduce, for some reason, there's a soldier just meandering around on this mainland, and they stumble into him. They spend some time with him before an alpha rips his spine clean out of his head. That is something this movie also likes to do. There's not really traditional infected anymore who go around and bite on you. Every kill in this movie has to do with an alpha Conan the Barbarian giant guy with a giant hog. Again, I need to reiterate that. And what they like to do is they like to pull your head off your body and rip your spine clean out. What I describe this movie as was somebody playing the forest for the first time, stoned out of their mind or ripping acid, and making a fan film about the cannibals in that who like to behead and hang the scalps and the spines of people in their caves. There was actually one scene in this film that is actually pretty cool involving these soldiers in the dark with an alpha who rips one of their heads straight off. But other than that, it's never really explained why there are no traditional infected anymore. It is all alphas. All of the main action is involving this one guy and his nudeness. But anyways, you have Spike and his mom, and they are on a vision quest to find this doctor so she can get the help she needs. And Jodie Comer, as I said in my review, I cannot stand this woman's accents. I don't know what it is. She pissed me off in The Bike Rider. She pissed me off in this film. Every line she talked, I thought she was boring. I thought this entire sub-story was boring. I don't know why we left the dad. If you thought the subplot between Spike and his mom worked for you, more power to you. For me, it did not work, and it felt like a spliced together version of 2 different stories where they didn't have enough story for the dad, they didn't have enough story for the mom, so they just spliced them together and started doing shit. So anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself again. So we get to the point where Spike and his mom actually meet this doctor. And it's trying to illustrate in these primal times that not everything you hear is what you believe. Obviously, we take technology for granted. There are these folklore legends about how crazy this doctor went. He's a pretty normal guy. Aside from the fact that he is covered in blood and he has managed to live amongst the infected for 30 years, they don't really explain how that happens. And this guy loves life and death. So much, in fact, he has managed to collect the skulls of like 10,000 people and make this giant bone temple that's all the way to the sky. He goes on to diagnose the mom and explain that her illness is cancer. We've all known somebody with cancer. It sucks. I get it. And the only reasonable thing you can do when you know somebody like that is have them walk about 200 yards down the road, put them out of their misery like Lenny from Mice and Men, and then take their skull, clean it, hand it to their son 5 minutes later, and ask them to present the skull to the top of your sacred bone temple ceremoniously. Which for some reason, this 14-year-old is just not crying, he's not emotional, he's accepted. His mom needed to go. The only way to pass her on is with the rest of the bones, which is ridiculously stupid. There's no continuity whatsoever for why you would just take this woman out back and put her down 10 minutes later. It feels like that was the very moment where any sane individual would have started to question the doctor and say, maybe this guy actually is off his rocker. Maybe the folk legend is right. That whole story arc with Spike and his mom is really the entire selling point of the second half of this film. They're really hoping for an emotional payoff where you feel connected to Spike, you feel the coming of age story, him losing his father mentally, him losing his mother physically. But to me, this entire subplot felt unearned and half-baked. Like we had to do all the legwork for these directors to make this feel like it was payoff. It felt so unearned. You never see the dad after the first half of the movie. The mother was unlikable. So the whole thing going on between this loss and grief and that explanation just had no weight to it. So the big payoff to this movie emotionally, the exploration of loss and life and death, did nothing for me because it just felt half-baked and it didn't feel like we got through organically. It just felt like we did this because we needed to write this massive statement about life into the movie. I also forgot another minor detail. There's a scene where the doctor is kind of lecturing Spike and his mom about this alpha. He shoots a blow dart into him and he says, I will not kill him. 5 minutes later, expectedly, the alpha attacks him because he's a fucking infected, and what do? They have to kill him. So again, it's inconveniences like that that make you question how this guy would have ever got around 30 years into this apocalypse with such a bleeding heart. Every person in this movie makes the dumbest possible emotional decision at every wake and turn. So now we're getting to the very best part. We have gotten past the storyline with Spike and his mom, and he decides he's not going to go back to his dad. He needs to go out on his own. This movie might have the worst ending of all time. I always discourage saying that. I'm so against extreme hyperbole. For what it is, for what the tone of this movie is, this movie might very well have the worst ending in cinema history. It's got to be bottom 3. So you have Spike, and he's out here and he's hunting, and he starts to get overran with infected, and conveniently for him, the same kid who got away from the opening shows up in a tracksuit, and he is here to help. And this guy is so out of place. I said it felt like a Dave Chappelle skit, like making a parody of the movie you're going to see on Family Guy about 20 years from now. The guy's almost dressed like a leprechaun in a tracksuit, and he shows up, and it was at this point I really thought the theater might have a filming problem. This almost feels like if you would have downloaded this movie 10 years ago off Pirate Bay, you would have got like a gambling ad in the middle of your movie. That's what this guy felt like. Like he just plopped in it and said, download FanDuel. But this guy is here anyways, and he's talking to Spike about the infected. And that's enough as is because this guy is so out of place. He's color coordinated. And then soon after, just like Robin Hood, his merry gang of men jumps out of the forest, starts doing parkour like ninjas, fighting the infected. They all have these color coordinated Power Rangers outfits. They all have different weapons. They're skilled. They're flipping off the walls. It is the most asinine, ridiculous thing I have ever seen in a movie theater. I said during my non-spoiler review, I wanted to laugh but felt like crying. Make no joke, I did both. I laughed to the point of tears. This elicited the biggest laugh I have ever had in the movie theater. Belly laughed for 5 straight minutes. This was the most tonally out of place thing I have ever seen in a film. This movie is exploring death and grief, and it's this post-apocalyptic world with these infected, and they're naked. And then you have these guys show up in tracksuits and just take them down like you're in an absolute cartoon, something out of the Power Rangers. It made no sense. Because I'm American, I didn't even know what the reference to this was. I guess a lot of people didn't. Since then, because of the comments, I have gone on to realize this is about some guy named Jimmy Seville. And I actually saw a tweet where somebody said, if you understand the context of this film, the ending and the guy they meet is actually the most terrifying of them all. Which had me thinking, obviously, yeah, these guys in tracksuits that are dressed like ninjas are obviously way more terrifying than the alphas that are beheading and despining people in real time. I don't care what they're going for. This is the most tonally bankrupt, dumb as fuck ending I have ever seen. I'm still almost laughing now. Yeah, for me, I feel like so many people are on copium for this film. This was an absolute disappointment and an absolute train wreck. Tonally all over the place, these terrible editing choices at the art tree and the medieval stuff. The emotional angle doesn't pay off at all. We throw the dad to the wayside after 40 minutes. It's like 2 movies spliced into one. You see way too much alpha hog. I didn't sign up for OnlyFans. Yeah, I did not like this movie. I didn't hate it as much as a lot of people seem to hate it. Some people were talking like it's the worst movie of the decade, but I just needed to talk about this film and cleanse it from my palate so I can move on with life because this shit was just so garbage, I cannot get out of my head. As always, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, like, comment, subscribe. All of that helps the algorithm. I will see you in the next review. Thank God we're done with this one. Peace.